Hey everybody, this is Dark Guardsman, and we're back with another modding tip of the day. So this one's a little strange to think about, specifically since I made a video earlier telling you to always ask questions. But this one is not in direct contrast to it, but can be thought of as the other side of the coin of the same situation. When you're asking questions, you will get into situations where the answers you're receiving are not enough to answer the question. You may ask something like, why is the sky blue, or something, and you get an answer back, it's blue because of light or something. But it doesn't give you enough. You don't get that feeling that you've done enough to answer the original question that you made. And these times is when it actually is a really good idea to do an experiment, to do some research, go actually find some of the sources and stuff of the information you were being given and actually find out more. Because when you actually do these experiments, when you actually do these research, when you actually do a lot more than this, you start getting a lot more first-hand experience of what can happen, what can fail, and how systems work. Now, one thing to note, because I have to do the disclaimer on this one, because I know people are going to be doing stupid things when I say this, or they're going to blame me for stupid things after the fact, for things they would have already done anyways, regardless of this video. So when you're doing experiments, please be intelligent and don't go do experiments and stuff, or don't go do research that is dumb. Like, don't stick stuff in the microwave, don't catch things on fire. Be safe about what you're doing. What I really mean about doing experiment, do things that you have a question for that you can do pretty safely. And for this context, this is about coding more than it is about other things. Although there are things you can do experiments with in real life, like seeing like how much you can fill a bottle of water up with, or is this compactor design better or worse? So like those type of things that are good to do that aren't going to hurt you or hurt somebody else or cause problems, etc., etc. Now, then again, I can't stop you from doing that stuff. If you really do want to do it, just don't blame me for it when you go to do it. Well, let's move on with what we're talking about, and let's go ahead and flip to a backdrop of Minecraft so we get something to stare at here. We'll stare at the boiling here. But when you're asking questions and stuff, you don't get the answers and you want to do experiments. This is something I actually do very, very often with making mods and making software, is that finding information about how to make something and how something works and how to function is not the easiest thing as you would think. You can go around and ask questions and you won't get a satisfying answer or an answer at all. And this has actually happened to me quite a few times. There's been moments when I've asked, like, which data structure is better. There was a while back where I couldn't quite figure out for sure if an array list or a hash set was better than each other, because there were benefits to both. There were definitely this, and like, what made this worse is that I knew from taking classes that one was better than the other, but it didn't feel quite right. Something was off, and I had to go through and I had to go make tests. I had to go actually watch the data, see what the data was doing, watch the timings of like how long it took to do each execution of the data, how the data was stored, how the data was removed, and everything else. And the experimentation showed me what was better. It not only showed me what was better, it showed me a ton of information that I did not know. And while I was doing this, I was also interacting with other people, asking them questions, showing them the test results, getting feedback, getting some kind of collaboration going on there. And I found out that one, what I already knew is hash set was better than array list. I don't know why my brain told me no. And then two, there are problems with hash sets when you're actually using them. So when you actually use a hash set, you have to give it basically a key. This like little thing called a hash, which is the reason why it's called a hash set, is that you use this key, which is a hash, to actually find stuff in the actual set. So when I stick stuff in it, it will use that number to stick there in there. Well, that hash can be the same for several items. Something I knew could happen, but I thought was rare, but was not as rare as I actually found out with the data. This really came into what I was doing, is I was using block positions in the newer version of Minecraft, which basically is a little integer, 3 integers that track the X, Y, and Z of a position of the block. Pretty standard little thing. But its hash, when it's generated, will actually overlap with another block really commonly, and this can actually cause performance problems with hash sets, which is the reason why I did all this testing and went through all this thing. Is that as I was actually making some tests, I found this, and I was like, oh wait, this is worrying that we get a whole bunch of conflicts, because once you get a conflict, you actually do slow down how a hash map or hash set work. because every time you stick the hash in there and you have another item that's going in there, every spot where there's an overlap is now an array list, and that array list actually is storing all those numbers and everything else, and we'll have to retrieve them back. And I think a hash can only have like one item, but the point's not there. There's a whole bunch of data that I found out about hash sets from first-hand experience, from actually sitting there and using them and toying with them and testing them. I learned much stronger how those systems work, even though from taking classes and reading books I had the knowledge, but from doing the experimenting I gained the understanding. I gained the wisdom of using that stuff. Well, wisdom came later, because how it works is that you gain the knowledge, from the knowledge you gain understanding, from understanding you gain wisdom. It's whole video I could do on that by itself. But experimenting can do a whole bunch of things. It doesn't have to just be from coding. Like, say you're experimenting with different ways to make graphics look. So we got this system of the boiler sitting in front of us, which is boiling and boiling of water, tons of particle effects and everything else. This took a while to actually get to a reasonable level. You do too much and it gets overwhelming, and I still think I might tone it back a little bit. But this is something that you can only tone back through experimentation. There's nothing that you can actually do. You can't ask somebody, like, what is the correct number of particles to generate? What's the correct velocity to do with them? How long should I let them last? What color should I use? Where should I spawn them at? Nobody's going to know that answer. You're not going to be able to ask that question. That's something you're going to have to experiment with. You're going to have to tweak. You're going to have to tinker with over and over and over and over again until you get something that looks really good. And it's going to look good depending on the angle you're at. So there's also a lot of different situations where the test conditions can change this. Where you have to experiment with different particle placement, different bubble placement, different things, and then you still end up having the problem which I have, which is that you have that square right there in the middle that just ruins the whole effect no matter what you do. But experimenting will actually help with a lot of this, and experimenting with different pieces of code as well will do a huge amount for different things. Like, I'll go through and I'll do tons of research, reverse engineering a lot of code, then I'll experiment with the code I just reverse engineered. So I'll go, okay, I know how the fluids render, which is a big thing I actually went through the process of doing for this mod. Is I actually went and researched how fluids render, because I was trying to think of a way to fix that center thing. So you go through and you do a ton of research, gather all the data up, you find out how all the rendering works, then you experiment, and then you start making systems that you try to fake the game into making it render the fluid in the middle. You try to do different fluid render systems. You experiment with different mechanics. You toy around and do different things just to answer the question of, like, how can we actually make this work? Inevitably, I ended up figuring out that I need to spend a lot more time working on it. So there is actually answers you will get back from experimenting that are not the answers you're looking for, which is good. You're not really, when you start experimenting, you're not really looking for a answer. Although you can come in with a hypothesis and try to confirm that if you're doing experimenting properly, but most of the time when you want to experiment, you're looking for something. You want to go in as unbiased as possible, and you want to look for something in result. And you want to do the experiment a few times, and you want to toy around with it, change the conditions, get a little bit more data. When you get all your data, then make some kind of assumption based on the data of what your answer is going to be. And then my answer was that needs more time. And this is something you'll have happen to you very often when you're actually making mods, is that you just need to do more. There's not a real answer you get where, oh yeah, this method's 100%, or this method's good, or we're going to stick with this method. ICBM is another example of this. Every time I improve improve the runtime of the explosives, I go, it's not enough, we can do more, and I experiment more and more. And then sometimes my experiments will lead to actually making it worse. Like the current version of ICBM 2, the explosives are not perfect, and I do actually have to go back through and fix them because now they're too slow. But you get other things where experimenting with different things. Atomic science is another example of experimenting. I actually spent yesterday experimenting with the radiation system. As you can tell, the counter up there is a little bit different. I don't know how many people were actually paying attention to it, but as I run around, that counter will change and move and change and move. And one of the mechanics I actually did add, which I'm going to be doing a video on here later, is that you see right here 99. I had to experiment with this until I got it working just right, of where that wall will now stop radiation to a certain extent. And this took some experimentation. I had to go take the blast code from ICBM, toy with it, tweak it, pump it back into my radiation system, because we wanted to use the same type of pathfinding that ICBM used, but we need to do a lot of other calculations. And through experimenting and working with this, I found different ways to make it work, different ways to balance it out, different ways to damper the radiation and do things with it. But I also found out there actually are mechanic problems with the new system that I'm going to have to experiment with and fix and do everything else. Anyways, I've been rambling off for quite a while, so I'll go ahead and end here, but we'll probably come back and do another video on this by itself, because there's a lot of topics we could talk about just with experimenting. But the main thing is that when you are asking questions, you're not getting back a satisfying answer. Sometimes you just want to do a little bit of research and experimentation so you can make the answer that you're you don't want to make the answer you're looking for. You want to get an answer that is created from the experimentation that may be what you want or may not be what you want, but is an answer that you could be looking for.